All right, we're going to spend a little bit of time on passwords. Like I said, I'm sure everybody's bored of us talking about this stuff, but we're actually going to dive into it a little bit more. We're going to geek out here a little bit. So let's talk about length. Length of passwords, absolutely critical. In fact, maybe the most important aspect of what we're going forward with. And we like to use a minimum of 12. CGIS is 8. Well, 8 or more, so we can still do 12 and still be compliant. And if we're going to do 12, how hard would it be for us to do 14? And we'll talk about why in just a second. And then complexity, mix it up, but in a way that's easier for you to remember. What we don't want you to do is make it hard for you to remember, but easy for a computer. So let's mix it up in a way that makes it interesting. Let's add different things to it so it's random. And here is really important. There are concepts here that we often overlook. A lot of it has to do with our humanness, right? When we talk about things, we often think about, well, I'm going to make it longer by adding the same phrase in front of every other password I've ever used. Well, maybe that's not a good idea because they've seen those other ones, or assume that they have, or assume that other people are using those kind of things. And we'll talk a little bit more. And then freshness. Don't use the same one over and over again, or don't just simply change one number every time because we're required every 90 days to change it. Doesn't mean add a 2, then a 3, then a 4. Yes, we know you do this. We all do this. It's in our nature to do this, but it's not a good idea. It makes it easy for the bad guys. And creativity is perhaps almost as important as the length, right? Here we need to really step it up. This is when we are creative, computers aren't. They're not good at making things up. We are. And so it's really important. And then also let's have some kind of lockout methodology. In other words, you got to wait after you failed a bunch of times. Why? Because then it's really tough for the computers to brute force it, for them to try over and over again. And as we look into it, it's really important. We're going to get into this a little bit more than we usually do here in a second. I just want you to share with you some really interesting figures as to cracking and how easy it is until we start doing things with lockout.
It's also worth noting here that using a password wallet is highly recommended because if you have, I mean, everybody has an account to, you know, Adobe and their email and, you know, every website that ever needs to input your information is going to have an account associated with it. That's way too many passwords for any one person to remember. So people come up with these techniques where they will either reuse their passwords outright, or maybe they'll tweak a number or tweak a character here or there, but the core password is largely the same. We run into a huge problem there because if any of those sites leak that password, now they have a way to get into all your other accounts. You know, one way around that, you could get creative. You can change, instead of, you know, maybe generate a passphrase and salt it with, you know, pepper with different characters that you always use, like a period between, maybe you like putting periods between words, for example. It's not something that, you know, that you use everywhere, but you use it for 3 things. You could do that, but having a password wallet for a lot of these accounts, it just makes it so much more manageable. Now, we recognize in IT that password wallets aren't always feasible for everything. Sometimes you have to type in password, say, for encryption key for a hard drive. You know, you don't have access to a password wallet at that point. I mean, you could pull it up on your phone and then have to type something in. But the point being, the password wallet won't solve all your problems, but it'll certainly make a lot of these sparse accounts way more manageable.
And sometimes it's also important to remove things. You can take all the vowels out of your passwords. It's interesting, right? Make it creative, make it something that it is unique to you so that you can do that. I've also heard ones where people take off just the first 2 letters of every word, and it's interesting. You know, it's kind of a removal technique, but it works. Some of the things to